We are so excited to have you today, and thank you for joining us for this open house to discuss Yale School of Management's Women on Boards program. My name is Kavitha Bindra. I'm the Executive Director for Executive Education here at the Yale School of Management. And before we kick things off, just have a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar, and the recording will be distributed afterwards to all registrants. So of course, feel free to take notes, but you will have access to this recording after the event. And we're here today to answer your questions about the program, questions about preparing to serve on a board, upskilling to better serve on a current board, finding a board seat, and more. These might be some of the questions that you have. Please do pose your questions to our panelists today. The best way to do that is you can either send them to me directly by chat or drop them into the full chat so everybody can see them. And I'll be moderating both and fielding incoming questions to our featured speakers as we go. I just wanted to mention briefly that as I noted, I oversee executive education here at Yale SOM, but I was lucky enough to be a participant in the Women on Boards program. So I know that you're in for a real treat if you decide to join us in May and June, but I'll also let our panelists speak to that as well as past participants. So our guests, Paula Volent and Tracy Steinwand, both currently serve on boards and attended our Women on Boards program. The program is designed to help women and those who support them launch a successful board search seed. And we'll dive into this further as we go. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paula and Tracy. And Tracy, perhaps I'll have you introduce yourself first, and then Paula, and we'll start going into some questions.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. So I'm Tracy Steinwand. I was a participant in this program in, I'm going to say 2020, because it was the COVID year. So we had a bit of a interesting mix in how that all played out. I have a career in the quick service restaurant industry. So I served with Subway restaurants for a number of years on the global level, on regional levels. And now am the Vice President of Operations for a company based in Vancouver in Canada. The board I actually just recently came off of was for an international franchise company based out of Australia with US operations. And the Yale program was instrumental in helping me secure that seat and knowing what to do as I had my first year in that great, fun learning system.
Great, thank you, Paula.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here. I was in one of the first programs, all in person. My background is I had a career as an art conservator, restoring works of art. And then I wanted to be a museum director, and I decided to come to Yale School of Management. I have a degree, an MBA from Yale School of Management. During my time at Yale School of Management, my daughter was born, and I took a break and started working for the Chief Investment Officer at Yale. One thing led to another. After I left the Yale School of Management, I worked at the Yale Investments Office, and then I worked at Bowdoin College, a small college in Maine, for about 21 years as the Chief Investment Officer. I was going to retire after my 21 years, but then I got nabbed by the Rockefeller University in New York, where I am now the Chief Investment Officer. I'll talk a little bit later about my experience at the program, which was amazing. I serve on two boards, two corporate boards. One is MSCI, which is a market index. They're very involved in ESG and in market indices. And I'm also on the fun one, First Dibs, which is an auction site. I'm sure many of you know what it is. And it's just been eye-opening to be on the other side as an investor in a corporation. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you both. And Paula, I have to say, I love your characterization of working for the Chief Investment Officer at Yale as a break, taking a break from the MBA. That's great. So I just wanted to, dive right into both of your decision making around wanting to pursue board service. And, I'd love to hear from both of you about your motivations and what considerations came into play when making the decision to seek board seats.
Paula, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I have taken 2 executive leadership things at Yale, the Women on Corporate Boards and Women in Leadership, which was really when I took a break, a 4-month break between Bowdoin and the Rockefeller University. I did the Women in Leadership, which was all remote, but the program on women in corporate boards was in person. I really wanted to learn about, a company from the inside out and from the governance perspective. I also care deeply about women being involved in business. I don't, there's a dearth of women CEOs and women board, and I think it's improving. I'm one of the founders of Girls Who Invest, which is a wonderful group that brings women investors, but I really thought I needed to step up. I also am getting a little bit older, and I think you should find a board position while you're still working. And I am sort of like creating my future portfolio of activities when I step back. The learning process that I've had, particularly at MSCI for doing mergers and acquisitions and deciding on dividend payments, stock buybacks, it's phenomenal. And I should say that throughout my whole career, I have been a very active not-for-profit board member. And so that piqued my interest in extending those skills by taking the Yale program.
So thank you, Paula. And before you respond as well, Tracy, I'd love to dig in a little bit into one thing you said, which was seeking a board seat while still working. And if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, a lot of women, especially when they retire, want to be on corporate boards. I think one of the major things that you learn at the Yale program is you have to think about what committee you would be on, and you have to use your sort of domain expertise or your experience in your past jobs and employment to see which committee you would serve on. So I have a lot of experience in investments, so I typically serve on an investment strategy or something like that. But I do think that with the Yale program, we did talk a lot about that it's good to start your thinking about being on a corporate board earlier than later. And I don't know, Tracy, how you feel about that.
I completely agree. And I think another way of thinking about it is that while you're still working full time, you're still exposed to in your daily life to the latest and greatest thinking, whatever the latest group of consultants are saying about whatever topic is coming up. So you're still living that day to day. Whereas at a board level, as you're preparing for meetings and doing your little bit of part-time work in between the sessions, you do a deep dive while you prepare for the meetings, and then you have a little bit less involvement along the way. So keeping current by having by keeping current with the thinking in your day job, I always found was really helpful as you approached the board meetings and help make decisions on what should happen for the business. So Paula, I completely agree.
Yeah, and also there's a question in the chat I see that is about conflicts of interest while you're still working. I think my corporate board work is so additive to my day-to-day work because it actually gives me sort of the whole picture. But when you serve on a board, there's very strict corporate governance and bylaws and all of that. So you learn a lot about corporate governance. And I haven't seen any conflicts in my board participation. I think actually it's been additive, and I have been additive to the board.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And Tracy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your motivations and what considerations came into play when you were.
So I think was like a lot of other people, that I was trying to imagine what my life was going to look like in a few years and what I needed to do to prepare for it. And truly was thinking about a time when full-time work wasn't necessarily in my world and how I would eventually do that. So so I thought, oh, serving on a board could be interesting. I've got some interesting experience that could be helpful for some companies. And realistically, I had no idea where to start. So I started researching I just started doing some Googling and finding out how to become what it takes to become a board member, what you need to do when you get there. Anyway, I came across a few different tools to help out, but then found the curriculum for the Yale program and thought, actually, this sounds exactly what I'm looking for. Oh, and by the way, it's up the road from where I live. So it gave me the added benefit of being able to spend a bit of time on campus, which was something I kind of always wanted to do when I lived in the Northeast. So I thought, this is perfect. And it was the program was a really good fit for where I was.
Great, thank you. So how did you gauge your readiness for a board? And Tracy, perhaps you can start, and then Paula can respond as well. But how do you gauge whether you would be attractive, or what what qualifications you would need to build?
So I was working through, to be honest, one of the really helpful tools that helped me get there was some of the questions that the Yale program asked me as part of the application process. You have to do this, you have to show that you've had some thought and some consideration as to what you could add to a company. And I actually found that process really helpful in helping me kind of determine what value I could add. And then I will tell you, I may have had a little bit of imposter syndrome as I was participating in the program, because I'm like, you're in this group with these incredibly impressive people. And you're like, oh, am I in the right place? Like, really, do I deserve to be here? And then by the time you're done the program, you're like, actually, I can offer this and I can offer this, and I've got great experience with this. And here's where my experience is a little different than everybody else I've got. The program was a really good experience for just reinforcing for me that I do have things that are of value, that I can contribute at a board level successfully. It was really helpful.
Yeah, and let me add to that. One of the things, it does help you sort of focus in on things, and also things that you haven't thought of. So when I went there, there's a whole section about your online presence and what your board resume looks different than your CV. And I had never focused on that. I just worked for 21 years. I thought everyone knew who I was and what my skills were. And I really thought that it was really interesting to look at myself from the perspective of someone looking to put someone on a board, and how it's different from your CV or your academic CV. Also, I think the Yale program is relatively small, and so the networks that you establish there with the group are really important. And I still keep up with my group, a lot of members of my group, and we've been helpful to each other. And I do think that things that you do everything from cybersecurity to accounting to team building, and the breadth of it, every day when I'm working for MSTI, I realize, oh yeah, we talked about this at Yale, and some of it I wasn't really familiar with. I mean, for people that are not in finance particularly, it's especially important to know how to look at a balance sheet and to understand finances. And I think that gives you a step in the door, and they're very patient, great teachers. And it really added a lot to how I thought about myself as a board member.
The curriculum also challenged me to think about things in a way that I probably didn't realize I was going to have to do. So there was one session that I will always remember where we did a case study on a case study on a rogue CEO and how the board was going to address that. And here's the early warning signs. What would you do? And then what eventually happened in that case. And I will tell you, that was a really interesting. That and the session on what do you do when your business is in trouble and needs to come into some sort of transformation program. Those are probably the ones that stick out to me, because they were the ones that really made me think differently than how you would as a manager or in a senior exec role. It was
and also the drama one where you had to read Shakespeare with a convincing voice, and then with your peers. I mean, I thought that was really interesting, because when you're a woman on a board, a lot of times you do have to speak up. You have to sit into your power, and that's hard to do. And I thought that theater, the drama section was really good about speaking up and how you present yourself.
Yeah, it was really helpful.
I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. So there's a question around being a quick riser in the organization, so younger than VP peers, certainly one of the only women at my level. Is there any consideration I should give to current level or years experience before thinking about board work?
I can address that because I am all about, we're looking at this AI yesterday at an investment committee, you know, this chat bot, which now can write people's essays. And so one of the things I think is that the diverse skill sets that boards need now, they need young people as well as experienced people. They need young people who know what the new tech things are. They need young people who know what the market trends are, but they also need people with lots of experience and gray hair that have seen cycles. So I think you're never too young, you know, to think about how you could add to a company's board and help them succeed.
And I think a responsible board is looking at the skill sets that they have. They're looking at the business that they're going to have for the next few years, and they're looking to understand where their gaps and skills are. So if my gap is in technology, then I'm probably going to be looking for somebody who has expertise in that, and that's likely going to be somebody who's not 80. There is that if boards are looking at it from a perspective of what skills do I need versus the age of the person I need, which is really what they should be doing, then your age is not necessarily a deterrent as long as you've got the experience to back it up, in my experience.
Great, thank you both. I'm going to conflate a couple of questions I see here about the uniqueness of the Yale program versus other choices, and you know, sort of what prompted both of you to select the Yale program. You know, I should sort of caveat for both of you that, you know, I assume you haven't done sort of the level of training for a board's preparation program in another school, so you can't directly, you know, compare the experiences, but it might be helpful, you know, to weigh in on what drove your interest. And then I think as a, you know, secondary point to, you know, to speak on maybe what was a key learning from the Yale program that you applied to your board position. So Tracy, maybe I'll start with you, and then Paula can jump in as well.
Well, I'm guessing Paula's going to have a much more eloquent answer on why she chose Yale. I'm going to be very honest to tell you that I was looking at a few of them. The curriculum was interesting in a few different ones, but really what won for me is Yale was literally up the road. So that was probably a big tipping point for me on that one. And there is no doubt that the Yale brand has been incredibly powerful as I have conversations with folks about my experience and what I've done to prepare. That is absolutely been absolutely really helpful. Kavitha, what was the second part of the question?
What were you able to apply from the program to your board service? Oh,
I'm going to be very honest and say that the whole concept of knowing what a board bio was, like, let's talk about simple things first. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a board bio, which is just sort of a standard thing you need to even get your foot in the door. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know at the time that there was a whole matrix on what boards were looking for in their skill sets. But once you know those basic tools exist, then you know how to craft your, I'm going to say your applications, or you know how to craft your approaches to different people to talk about board seats at that very basic level. And then you start to get into the more meat and potatoes of the whole thing, which is, what do you do when you're there? How do you actually add value? How do you bring your unique perspective to help the business make better decisions? All of that came through the program as well.
Yeah, I would say I actually have not done the program, but I've sat in on a couple of sessions of one of the Harvard ones on women on boards. I would say that the Yale one was more diverse. There's lots of, in my program, there was an Army general. There was a woman who was one of the programmers for, TikTok. It was like such a diverse group of women. And so I think that's a little bit different because I think when you go to HBS, also you're not in the campus at HBS, you're way over, you know. So I haven't been to the other ones, but I think the campus of Yale and being right in the middle of it is really wonderful. You stay at a nice hotel when you're there and you really bond. And as I said, it's a smaller group. I think some of the key learning parts that I learned was, you know, as I said, as you mentioned, sort of the difference of the board resume, which is very interesting. Also, they do assign you with someone who helps you with your resume and is a senior professional. That was really helpful to me. And also, they bring in lots of headhunters, search firms that are looking for board, you know, that do board searches. And just hearing how they think about the search was extremely important to me about which things I would emphasize when I was being recruited for a board in my, you know, in my expertise. So I just thought that coming to the perspective of the recruiters and the senior person that was assigned to me to look at my resume was really a really good learning thing for me.
Paula, I'm glad you mentioned the mentor part of the program because I completely forgot about that. I will tell you that's one of the most invaluable parts of it. So the lady that I was assigned to had been a director at Disney for years and years and years. And just having the ability to send her an email every once in a while and go, hey, by the way, I got selected for a board, or would you mind just checking this, checking my board bio for you? Like, invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. She's a rock star anyway, and just having the ability to do that is worth the whole program, actually.
Thank you both. And, you know, I might just add a couple of things, and hopefully this will answer some of the questions that are coming through as well. You know, that I think the focus of this particular program is not only on the sort of getting you prepared to search for the right board seat. And we talk a lot about, you know, you're seeking, but boards are also seeking, and it's really about that matchmaking process is really important. You know, so we of course spend a lot of time working on those materials, the board bios, really crafting your value proposition, working with the recruiting firms and coaches on that piece. But the other really important piece, and I think is unique, is our dual focus on how you're successful once you're on a board. And, you know, we spend a lot of time, you know, talking about managing conflict on boards, you know, asserting your presence on boards, as Paula noted, but also, you know, from a content perspective, how do you you know, manage financial statements, and, you know, if you join the audit committee, what does that mean? You know, how do you think about compensation? What are the key governance issues that you have to deal with when you're on a board? And so really giving you those tools from, you know, world-class faculty at SOM and Yale more broadly, you know, I think is a real distinguishing factor of the program. And again, I can't speak to what other programs do necessarily, but we were very intentional about you know, drawing from the real expertise of, you know, Yale faculty across the board. You know, and one really wonderful thing about, you know, I think all of our Yale programs is that we make a real effort not only to draw from the School of Management, but from all of the amazing schools on campus. So, you know, Paula referenced the Executive Presence course, which is taught by a member of our drama school faculty. So, you know, I think that's something that's pretty unique. So you know, I think I'm seeing a lot of questions about, you know, sort of how you got your foot in the door, and, you know, how you sort of started, you know, how you initiated the process, and was Yale helpful to you in starting the process and getting your foot in the door? And I can answer some questions after you both weigh in about how we incorporate search firms into our program, but I'll let you both weigh in on personally how you approached it.
I can start. For MSCI, as I said, I have served on a lot of not-for-profit boards. I serve on a lot of investment committees, and I serve on the National Gallery of Art. I serve on the Pritzker Family Foundation. Those are, and a lot of not-for-profits, they want you to give money. You want to give money. And with the MSCI, they reached out to me on the recommendation of someone who had been on an investment committee with me in the not-for-profit sector. So they reached out, and then they hooked me up with the headhunter and the search firm. And I have to say, had I not gone to the Yale program, I would not have been prepared for the interview with the search thing. I had to dust off my notes. And actually, I came prepared, but I think unless you've been through with a search firm, ordeal that you go through and the questions they ask you, and then you have to go and meet some of the directors and all of that. And I felt like Yale had prepared me for that. I would never have known, some of the questions that they were going to ask. For the first dibs board, that came about sort of through investments. I was interested in going through an IPO with the company, and they were looking to add a woman to the board, and I raised my hand. Again, I had to go through a search firm, but and that's a really fun one. I have to say the MSCI, there's lots of reading, lots of preparation. And also we get rated by shareholders on how they like us. They vote on us in the annual meetings. So, I just think that the preparation to work with the search firm is one of the great things about the Yale program.
So my experiences were a little bit different. The company that I have served on for the last little while, it's a private company with operations in a few different countries around the world. So their approach to finding a new board member was, I'm just gonna say it's more modern. They used a lot of social media to find them. They went out to, as I've learned, happens in a lot of companies, they went out to their own networks first to see what they could find for folks. And I did know the CEO of that company from, I'm going to say from a previous life, from a very, very long time ago. And so when they sent out their post on social media saying that they were ready for a new global board member, I had the confidence, I had the knowledge, and now I had the experience to be able to stick my hand up and say, yes, I'm interested in this, and two, I can add great value to your business. And I undoubtedly believe, although they've never told me, I undoubtedly believe that it was the Yale program that I happened to drop in at during the interview process that helped me get a little bit above the other candidates, because they had some incredibly qualified candidates for that role. And the fact that they chose me was a little unorthodox. So the fact that I had this formal education that sits behind all the experience that I could offer, I do think it gave me a leg up for that one. And then of course, now that I've been on that board, I get calls from other people who are saying, oh, we see you have experience here. Could we talk to you about serving on this board?
Yeah, I think both of you are making really important points that, so much of the search, we at Yale can provide some tools and support, but ultimately the search is done by you. And, both of you have referenced sort of networks and connections that you made. I mean, that's how many of us have gotten our jobs, our primary careers, but also, it's really the approach for the board search as well. But that said, the tools, the preparation, the confidence, and the knowledge that this program can provide is critical, I think, for a successful board search. I did want to mention that we do incorporate recruiters and executive search firms into our program. So in the coming summer, we will invite some search firms that we've worked with for all of our cohorts. We'll invite representatives from the search firms. You will have a chance to hear from them first about the process, what boards are looking for, and they'll be available to answer the questions that you have, across the board. And that's been a really invaluable, I think, session for our participants, across all of the cohorts. And once you've completed your board bio, after meeting with your coaches and your peers, we compile that and can provide that to the recruiters who come to campus. But in addition to that, we do maintain resume books, and Paula or Tracy, if you ever want to send us an updated board bio, we'll incorporate that. And we do often get outreach from other firms that didn't come to campus, as well as individual sort of board searches. In fact, I think Paula, you reached out to us and asked if we had some candidates for a search you were involved with. So that's sort of the I guess I would call placement function that we can provide, and that ongoing support following the program. But of course, you always have the network, that both Tracy and Paula referenced in their answers. So I want to go into this question around compensation, because I think that's important. For corporate boards, what is the compensation range for board members? And I assume that varies based on company experience, perhaps even committee, but I don't know if either of you want to, and time commitment, I assume, but I don't know if either of you would like to weigh in on that.
It does vary. I can tell you that, and usually you get stock. And they like you to keep your stock because it shows that you believe in the company. This is for a public board. And it also, you get extra compensation if you're the head of, the chair of a board and of a committee. So the committees are audit. You have strategy compensation. There's all different committees, but I can tell you that the compensation is about $300,000 per year. So it's substantial. But again, you got to do all the work, and you're dinged if you don't show up and you don't do all the work. And actually, the MSCI board is very small, so if you haven't done your work, it's like being in one of those classes with your pajamas on, that you're in trouble. Anyways, I don't know if you want to address that, Tracy.
Yeah, I'm going to say, so my experience is with private company boards, and the compensation levels are much lower, significantly lower. Like we're talking like under 50,000 a year kind of thing. I'm assuming the scrutiny for a private company board is probably a little bit less. So there is more accountability for a public board, which probably is part of the reason that the compensation is so different. I looked at it as this was a really great way for me to build experience and help build a company. Now, in the time that I was with this last company, the last board I was on, we actually did an equity deal. So we sold to an equity company, and as a result, there was a nice payout at the end. So my yearly compensation wasn't great, but there was absolutely potential going forward as we go to the next transaction. So that's how that was built in for a company board, or sorry, for a private company board.
Yeah, and I totally agree, because that's similar to First Dibs, and the compensation again is in stock, and you're thinking that this is a company that just did an IPO, and unfortunately in the current market it's not so great, but you're thinking that your compensation is going to be working with the board to add value, and that will be your compensation.
Yeah.
Thank you. And sort of in pairing with that question, what sort of time commitments do these require? And, does that sort of drive compensation as well?
So I know in my perspective we had quarterly board meetings, which ran over 2 days each quarter. And so there was a ton of work. I'm going to say probably a full 5 or 6 days worth of work to prepare for, participate in, and then follow up from each of those meetings. And then during the non-board period prep things, I'm going to say I probably spent 2 or 3 hours a week. So a dramatic difference between them. I remember somebody from the program saying that while you're working full time, one board seat is probably a good fit. And now that I've been through that process, I understand why they say that. that makes a ton of sense. It's enough to keep you engaged and participating and valuable to the company that you're participating at board level with, but it also doesn't mean it's a distraction from your full-time job, because you still got to do that.
Yeah, and also if you're on something like a mutual fund board, there's lots of compliance and regulation, and you have to really go through all the materials. For the MSCI board, we have quarterly meetings. They're usually 2 days. There's lots of materials to read, and also when there's earnings announcements or any change, we have to be available. I do think it's a lot of work, and that's why I do think if it's somehow connected to what you do in your day job, if you're going to have it during your day job, it's much easier than having something completely outside of what you do in your day-to-day work.
Thank you. We had a question around sort of the percentage of international participants in the program. And I have to, I think we can get back to Lucia, about the exact percentage. But at least my experience in the last 2 cohorts was that we had a significant representation, international representation, folks from India, the rest of Asia. We had several participants from Central and South America, Europe, Caribbean, Bahamas, Canada, as well as the United States. But Tracy and Paula, I don't know if you want to share your experiences, just with the diversity of the cohorts that you worked with.
I think and I actually had the chance to do the program with Kavitha. She was actually in my group, so we had a great chance to spend some quality time together on Zoom. We had some folks from Bermuda from the reinsurance industry. They were particularly tied in and really interested in participating in the program. We had a lady who came from from Africa, a few from Latin America. I think this comes back to the power of the Yale brand again, right? What you're going to learn here is best practice for serving on a board no matter where you are in the world. And then the Yale brand just helps bring that to the next level.
Okay, great. So one question we've gotten a fair amount, not in the chat yet, which is interesting, but is nonprofit board service a good preparation for corporate board service? And how helpful did you find that service to be in terms of the search? And were the companies you were talking to interested in that board service?
I'm going to hand that one to Paula.
Yeah, no, I think that has been very additive to me. I think I have served on various boards over time, a land trust, and you always have to go through the budget. And usually in these smaller organizations, their budget is really constrained. A lot of times they bring in the board to strategize on, how they're going to increase their budget. I think it's really helpful. And also you get the corporate governance, the whole sort of process of going through a board meeting, the approvals, the committees and all that. You get the general structure. But I also thought that at the Yale program, you got a lot of that more directed to what the corporate, sometimes the not-for-profits are a little bit looser than the guidelines of a corporate board. But I do think it's additive, and it's also interesting to watch dynamics in boards, people who speak up and people who don't, people who are the head of committees and people who are not. And I think watching that in a not-for-profit board helps you when you go into a public board.
Great, thank you. Since both of you are sort of more intimately involved in the board world, I'm wondering if you have any perspective on some sort of trends in terms of open board seats. We have a particular question around the downturns in tech and biotech. Do you anticipate fewer open board positions in 2023? I know when Tracy and I were going through the program, there are sort of these opposing forces going on. Like there was a real drive for more women and underrepresented minorities on boards, and in fact some legislation in California promoting more women on boards. But at the same time, you had this opposing force where people really like their board seats, and in the absence of term limits, it's really hard to get people off of board to create those seats. So just wanted to hear what you both are sort of sensing, both from the boards you're involved with, but just generally in this space.
I've got two thoughts on that one. So my first one, and this is more gut rather than empirical research, that we are in a business environment which is different than many people have ever experienced in their life, and it's very different than what we've had for the last 5 years, which means businesses need to change how they do things, which tells me that there will be openings on boards as we change management, as we look for different ways to build revenue and do new strategy. My gut tells me there will be more opportunities as people cycle out experienced board members for new ones. And then my second thing is I was actually thinking about the tech and biotech question. One of the things that the Yale program will help you do is understand what your skills are. And so you may have skills that are not necessarily dog-eared into tech and biotech. I would be willing to bet that if you are at a senior exec level in those types of organizations, there is a lot of transferable skills that could take you into something that's not in those industries, or something that's not quite as impacted as they seem to be today.
Yeah, and also I can tell you that in recent, we have been doing board searches for MSCI. Some of the board searches, which actually I reached out to Yale, was go to market. And also so that's marketing. Also audit is getting more and more complicated, so audit experience. Also tech, as I mentioned, this whole transition to SaaS and cloud and all that. I think we need people on the committee that have expertise on that. And then also ESG and sustainability. There's big look at how not just the board, but the underlying employees, what the diversity is, what the impact, and also with this hybrid workforce, there's a huge discussion on boards about what is the workforce or the workplace of the future. And in all those cases, those are things that boards are looking for people with expertise. It's different than, I think it's changing, as you said, Tracy, there's a changing need for different skill sets, which is exciting.
There's a question there from Margaret about, is there examples of UX executives in the tech industry with board service? I don't have an example for you, but there likely is.
Yeah, well, we can take a look and let you know, but so it looks like we have a number of questions around sort of how the cohort is composed, and then sort of logistics and structure of the program. So I can answer some of those, and of course Tracy and Paula jump in with any insight from your experiences. But basically we have the program will have a online component. So this is sort of a hybrid of what Paula experienced and Tracy experienced. But we do have a one-day virtual learning day, and that day is really sort of an introduction to the board bio and really understanding sort of those building blocks to starting your board search, as well as meeting with our faculty director, Jeff Sonnenfeld. And I should have mentioned that as a distinctive feature of our program. For those of you that aren't familiar with Professor Sonnenfeld, he's a world leading expert in board governance, CEO transitions, leadership in general. But you may be more familiar with his most recent work, which is really holding corporations to account for investments in Russia following the Ukraine invasion. So he's the faculty director for the program, and as part of the one thing that he feels really strongly about is sort of the peer-to-peer learning, but also bringing in many of his contacts who have significant board experience, governance experience. And so you'll have a chance to, both in the virtual session and then the week-long on-campus session, you'll have a chance to connect with many of his various contacts, whether they be CEOs. We had Tracy, I don't know if we had Indra Nui. We did, yeah. So
you just popped in one day.
Yeah, so Indra Nui, former CEO of PepsiCo and a very prolific board member. She served on the Mayo Clinic and Amazon boards, but she came and spoke with us. And so we have that component built into both the virtual and on-campus program. In addition, we do have the classroom learning that I referenced, that really aligns with the various committees that are common to boards. But in addition, I think nodding to some of what Tracy and Paula referenced, we have built in sessions on ESG, as well as cybersecurity and thinking about cyber in general. Cyber law and cybersecurity have become increasingly important for board service. So you have that classroom component, and then you do have that sort of peer-to-peer networking, learning. You're giving a lot of feedback on your board documents. And then finally, you have that recruiter piece that I mentioned, having the search firms on campus. So that's sort of a sense for the structure of the program. There were some questions around paying for the program, and do you? I think a particular question around do you see this as an investment in yourself, or do employers pay for programs? I mean, I think we see it's sort of across the board. There are some employers who have worked with, have contracts with, senior employees and have said, we want you to serve on boards, so we're happy to support you in this kind of program. There are others who do see this as an individual investment. One thing that may be helpful to some of you, if you work for a nonprofit organization, there is a discount for the program, so you will get a 15% discount from that fee. The program fees include that 1 day of virtual learning as well as the week on campus, and that week on campus includes room and board, meals, your hotel, the nice hotels that Paula referenced, as well as all of the classroom learning, as well as the 2 private coaching sessions you receive following the program. So I packed a lot of information in there, but I did want to sort of answer, I think, a number of the questions that I saw on that. Tracy or Paula, anything you want to add just in terms of sort of the general experience of going through the program, just the friendships and the, I know you both referenced the work.
There was
it is hard work.
There is homework and team working and all of that, but it was really great. And as I said, it felt like me going back to business school for a week and doing something that I really felt like changed my view again on how I would project or be in a board. So it was great.
Yeah, and I look at the investment I made as an investment in me and my future, and am very happy that I made that investment. I will come back to something I said really early on, which was when I first got there, I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, am I ready for this? Do I have anything to add? Could I really do this? And by the time I was finished, it's like, yes, not only do you have things to add, it's like, don't be crazy. Of course you should be here.
I have to say I had the imposter syndrome too, because I was like, oh my God, look at these incredible women that are doing all these things.
Incredible people.
And I've been hiding in my little investment world for so long, but it was great.
Yes, we have, my group have a, so because I was in during COVID, we couldn't actually see each other in person. So as soon as we were able to do that, there was a few of us that actually met for dinner a few times. We actually went to the Yale Club and had dinner in Manhattan one night, which was really fun, and talked about our experiences. And then we have as you always do, you end up with a WhatsApp group coming out of it. And there's always been some good conversation, particularly in the first few months after the program. There were some really good conversations around, oh, what about this? And how do you do this? And oh, I've had success here. And then just last week, actually, that kicked up. So that group's been active again last week. So it is, it's a great program, and I'm really happy I participated in it.
Thank you both. And I do have a comment from one of the attendees on this webinar that she was able to make the case to her employer that their support for me to attend this course would help with risk management, among other things. So if you need help making the argument to your employer for support, here's a possible way to do that. So now I'm going to ask my colleague, Kristen West, who is Soric West, who's on the webinar, to put in the chat some links to the brochure and just some general program information, so all of you can access that. And I'm also going to put my email address in the chat. So, if you have any other questions for us, that weren't answered today, you can certainly reach out to me. But I hope you've gotten a sense today for, I think the real richness of this program, and the real impact that it's had, at least on two of our participants. But I can say for sure, having sort of a bird's eye view across the various cohorts, that that's the case for all of them. That not only did you develop this really amazing personal network that you can leverage for your board search, but also for other things. But just the learnings and the experience were really critical to success in that first seat. Just so you all know, we already do have several participants signed up for June. So the on-campus portion starts in June. There will be in May, the May day of virtual learning. And some really fascinating people, including a former Miss USA who's now a nuclear physicist, pretty amazing, as well as a college president of a really prominent college. So, just really amazing women already in this program, and, hope that many of you will be joining them as well. So with that, I'm going to give you all 5 minutes back. I really want to thank Tracy and Paula. I mean, as you can hear from their introductions, they're so incredibly busy with their day jobs as well as their board service. And I know Tracy just moved to the West Coast, so just a lot going on, and we're so grateful for your time. I think it's a testament to your finding this program really valuable and wanting to share that with this group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.